committee meeting to order. I'd always like to thank Courtney Porter, our clerk, for being here, and Lieutenant Bauer for their service to law and public safety. My committee members, Councilmember Flynn and Councilmember Winburn, will be here shortly. We have a long Councilmember Yvette Simpson is here. Welcome. We have three very important presentations this morning. And Councilmember Winburn, one of those presentations was on asset forfeiture. So I see the chief is here and his command staff to talk about asset forfeiture money so we can get a better handle on what the laws are, what the parameters are around that. But we also will hear this in our first presentation. We will hear from fathers who have lost their loved ones in the streets of Cincinnati. And oftentimes we highlight the mothers and their responses, but we're going to hear from fathers today who have lost their sons in the Cincinnati streets. And we will also hear from Crime Stoppers today, a very important institution in our community as another tool to fight crime. And it's incredibly important for citizens to understand and listen very closely to how that institution operates, so that we as a community are engaging our police department and providing them with information so they can respond and keep our communities safe. So if our fathers of murdered children, if you will come forward at this time, all of you together, and Hope, please come up.
I'm still waiting on another father that's downstairs.
He can join us. If you all will just first let me, and I know I can say this on behalf of our entire committee, we extend our condolences for the loss of your sons. What we want to have happen today is, first, we want to hear your story and give you an opportunity to tell your story and to give us some sense of where we are in solving those crimes. I think that's very important. But on behalf of our entire committee, we extend our condolences, and we'd like you all to introduce yourselves, move very close to the mic. It's important to pull those down and move very close so that everybody who is watching the Law and Public Safety Committee meeting can hear it. If we'll just start from right to left, and we want to hear from you, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you for having us come and speak today. My name is Ellie Burrows. My son is Dexter Burrows. He was murdered May 16th, 2010 in the Ritz nightclub. As far as his case is concerned, well, actually we had someone in custody, but the public didn't come out, and well, we were in court, and the witnesses bailed out on us. They didn't want to speak because they were afraid. So as of this moment, we're no closer than what we were from day one. But at the same time, I feel as though that being that the club is closed now, a lot of people should, they may come forward quicker. But the thing is, the witnesses, we have to let them know that they're safe, that they can call Crime Stoppers, that they can speak. A lot of them like to have protection. And, you know, there's no one, the way we feel, we can't even tell you because you have to go through it. We can talk to you till we blue in the face, but it's not gonna matter unless you went through it. You know, being a single dad, I raised Dexter, you know, and to lose your son or any loved one is devastating. You cry every day, you pray every day, you pray that your family can get closure. And plus Dexter had a daughter, my granddaughter, and I just think it's really unfair for her to grow up not knowing her father. She can never get no advice from him. Even something like meeting her boyfriend, first day of school, you know, father-daughter dance, nothing. This family has been just been torn apart. Oh man, it is rough, to say the least. There's not really an easy day. It's not a day that you don't think about him. Dexter, he's on your mind, he's on my mind from the time I wake up, sometimes during the day when you have that moment, and when you go to bed at night. As hard as you try, it doesn't go away, it doesn't get easy. People say it do, but it does not. It just doesn't. I think we all just need someone to step forward and just, I mean, we all just need help. Because neither one of us, we're not the same people as we were before. We're not. You can't be. There is no way. So I just want to remind the people that, you know, well, let's say, I just think, I don't know if I should, I just think that, you know, it just should be, oh man, well, that's for another time. Thank you. That's for another time.
Thank you. I'd like to, I want to rewind just on a few facts. Dexter was murdered when and where?
Dexter Burrows, he was murdered on May 16th, 2010, inside Club Ritz. Not on the outside, inside of Club Ritz. And I don't know if you all know by now that it is closed now. But I think being that it's closed, as far as the investigation is, I think people should step forward. They shouldn't be afraid. Like I said, people they just want some protection. Because nobody's speaking out on any of these murders, and it's a shame. Our families need closure. My granddaughter needs closure. I think with a little bit of help, being that it's closed, you know, we have to let the people know not to be afraid and for them to step forward.
What's important about your case, as many of the cases, this is inside of a nightclub.
It's inside of a nightclub where
people are inside of the nightclub when this occurs.
It was 700 people inside the nightclub.
700 people were inside of the nightclub.
He had some kind of plan with the metal detectors, and I guess nobody checked up on him, I guess, and it didn't matter to him. Money, it was more profit for this type of organization. It's more profit than for safety. And I think if you have 700 people in your club, mind you, if you have a car, let's say this, if you have a car, you must have insurance. You have 700 people inside your nightclub and there's no insurance. So that's not, you know, I mean, I don't think that guy was too much thinking about safety. I think it was just profit over safety. That's how I look at it.
Those people who because you had a case that was in court, it was proceeding forward, and it abruptly stopped
Correct.
from your testimony. And why did it abruptly stop?
Correct. We was in court, and it was getting ready to start. And again, we had a couple of witnesses. And then, you know, they pulled us out of court and told us the witnesses wasn't going to speak because they didn't feel safe. So the case stalled. I don't know. Again, I think we're back to square one. I'm just hoping, wishing, and praying that somebody with a conscience will step forward. I miss my son. I want my son back. I know you can't have it, but I miss my boy. I miss my boy.
And you deserve justice, if there is justice in this. And
I believe there is justice. I do believe someone will step forward. It's the waiting game, and that's what hurts you. The waiting game.
What would you like to say to those people who are in the club? They know exactly who murdered your son, about coming forth and providing information that leads to the conviction of the murderers or murderer.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't even want to say anything. Just for the simple fact, if you was going to do it, you should have been done it. You can't wait till they start eating at you to try to do right. You have to be right from the start.
I appreciate so much your testimony. And again, all of us extend our deep condolences. And one of the things that, as myself as a committee chair, that I'm committed to is making sure that people who are watching the Law and Public Safety Committee understand that the havoc, when they pick up a gun and they take somebody's life, how it impacts all of us, directly the families. It's not something you get over. You never get over it. And we have to humanize it so that as people are watching this, they are thinking about the decisions that they are making. Beyond whether there's a conversation about us catching you and putting you in jail for the rest of your life, about what you have done and how you have impacted another human being and their family. Something you can never, ever take back. And what is so frustrating for me as the chair is so often, too often, I hear people making excuses for this behavior. And there is no excuse. I don't want to hear about how tough the person who took Dexter's life, I don't want to hear how rough his life was. This is basic right and wrong. Sir, you have the floor.
My name is Terry Jones.
Mr. Jones, welcome to Law and Public Safety, and on behalf of this committee, all its members, we extend our deepest condolences for your loss, and we appreciate your testimony this morning. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you for having us here. My son is Jason Terry Wynn. He was killed in Avondale on March 1st. It's between 9 and 9:30 at night. He was taking his pregnant girlfriend to the bus stop.
Please move closer to that mic for me.
He was taking his pregnant girlfriend to the bus stop with his little boy. He put them on the bus. He's coming back up Forest when three guys come from behind the bushes in front of a church. They take him in back of the bush and back of the church to rob him. I think they probably took his shoes and they took something else, what money he might have had or whatever. I was told he had his hands up and he got shot anyway. The bullet pierced his heart. Jason stumbled out in the street, and that's where he died at. The street in Avondale on Forest was full of people. Even buses was coming up and down the street. I heard there were three guys. They all ran after they shot him. People come up to me, tell me they know who did it, but that's not doing me any good because they need to tell the police that. For some reason, they're scared to tell the police that. And they shouldn't be. I can't understand why, because of retaliation. If the people could be safer when they do tell what they know, then I know it would be all right. But I kind of understand them being scared to testify because people have been getting killed for testifying about murders. But this was in 2006. And I would figure somebody would have a conscience to come and tell what they know. But it's not that way. I was fortunate enough to be at home that night when Jason left. I was fortunate enough to speak to him before he left. He worked every day. He didn't stay out. He tried to do the right thing, but it didn't matter. Jason didn't deserve what happened to him, just like many other people don't. There are no witnesses. The police told me they had a suspect, but that's all I heard. I never heard from the homicide detectives. When I did call them, I never heard from them. So I felt like nothing was being done, just like I feel that now. After 6 years, it still hurt. It's like yesterday. He got killed on March 1st. My birthday is on the 28th of March. I can't celebrate my birthday. Don't feel like it. Because my son was taken in that month. Since then, I haven't spoken to any detectives, any homicide detectives. And I haven't heard anything. I'm just praying every day, like Mr. Burroughs, that somebody would come forward or the police could find somebody or find the gun that killed him, anything. I can't do nothing but pray. And the hurt never goes away. It might get a little easier, but it's still there. People say it heals in time, but it's not true. You'll never heal from that because a part of you are gone. Part of you is gone. And now I don't know what to do. Just keep on praying and going to meetings and trying to help other people. That's all I could do. And that night in March 1st, it was the most terrible thing that happened to me in my life. I'll never forget it. I can't. I'm just hoping that somebody would come forward or the police could help me. Other than that, I could do nothing but wait, pray.
Mr. Jones, we extend our condolences for your loss. Let's bring Jason to life a little bit. Tell me about Jason, because you said he was taking his kids to school.
Jason was taking his pregnant girlfriend and his
Mr.
little
Jones,
boy.
get real close to that mic.
He was taking a pregnant girlfriend and a little boy to the bus stop. He put him on the bus. And the people must have been watching him, the three guys. They got him after he put him on the bus. And I happened to be at home that night because I was sick myself. And how I knew, I was watching TV and I seen breaking news break in. And I seen a body out on Forest Avenue in Avondale, covered with a sheet. Somehow I had a funny feeling come over me. And I knew Jason is short and that person was short under that sheet. And I wasn't for sure until the detectives came about 2 hours later and confirmed that it was him. Jason was 22 years old. And he might have gotten in a little trouble, but not no trouble like robbing people, killing people, stuff like that. Jason didn't do stuff like that. He was a decent young man.
Well, Mr. Jones, as a young person, I got into some trouble too. So there's no justification for someone killing your son, period. This is the kind of behavior that we continue to see in our communities. And we keep hearing people say that they're scared, but then they want the problem to stop, and it doesn't work that way. Somebody is going to have to stand up and tell what they know about your son's murder. Someone watching us right now, they know exactly what happened to your son on
March 1st.
March 1st, 2006.
Yes.
And what street was it on?
It was on Forest Avenue in Avondale.
And your son, he was robbed. He was taken into the back of some areas, so no one could see.
He was taken into the back of a church, an empty church, where no one could see. He was robbed and shot. He just happened to stumble out onto Forest and for people to see him. If he didn't stumble out there, he might have been out there for a couple of days or whatever. No telling.
But see, there's somebody watching, I believe this, and they know all about what you're talking about. And what we need them to do, because after your presentations, Crime Stoppers is going to give some testimony, and we need people to provide information to our police department so we can find out who killed your son. And this is not about being scared. It's about doing the right thing.
Right.
And I appreciate your testimony. And I thank you again, and we extend from all of the committee members, we extend our deepest condolences to you and your family for your loss. And I know you don't need me to say that your son did not deserve, nor your pain, for him to be murdered.
I appreciate it, though.
Sir. Mr. Brown, thank you so much for being here. You have the floor. We want to extend our condolences to you for the loss of your son. And it's very important in your testimony that you bring your son to life and you share with us what happened to your son so that the whole city can hear. And we thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity. I didn't look forward to this. Ms. Dudley called me last week asking me to participate, and I didn't look forward to this one iota. To be truthful with you, I didn't want to come. I talked to my other grandfather, young man right here, Mr. Frazier. encouraged me, and I'm doing it not for myself. I'm doing it for the community and for the other young men that's sitting right here. It's about time that you see the face of the fathers, because normally you only see the face of the mothers. This is a tragic time in the community with too many young men that's losing their lives. And Avondale is a hot spot for too many of these killings. This young man lost his son in Avondale. I lost mine in Avondale in broad daylight. This will be the 8th year in broad daylight on Labor Day, between hours 5 and 5:30, no more than 40 yards from the house where he was born. And there was witnesses on the street. The only person that had the guts to come forth and be a witness was a young man, probably at the time 8 years old. Nobody else had the courage to open their mouth, you know. And I was, and he came to the house that day just before he was murdered, and I was mad at him. And that hurt me to my heart, because I didn't say nothing to him that day. And me and the wife heard the gunshots. First we thought it was firecrackers. And then to have my niece to knock on my door and tell me that my son was shot. Lay in the middle of the street. And he was dead. I would have gave my life for my baby. I don't want to do this. I fear no man on 2 feet. But he was the type that would gave his life for his family. He had 4 children. One is his granddaughter, too. He would be home every day, waiting until I came home for work. He was more like a protector. Called himself on to try to look after me and his mother. Yeah. He carried no weapon. He was robbed, attempted robbery. It's too much of this. His mother needed a heart. His heart was damaged. She could have used his heart. She had congestive heart failure and got received a heart transplant from a heart pump from University Hospital and called it infection. She was in the hospital for almost a year and a half from this. And then they canceled the program. Then we had to go to Louisville, Kentucky for the same procedures. Then we had to go to Indianapolis for another 3 years. She died 3 years later. She never recovered from my baby. There's too much of this in this community. Yeah. There's too much bickering on the political side. Too much of this Democrat and Republican crap. There's human life out here. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard enough being people of color. Our life is hard enough. People need to care. Our people is dying. Yeah. What are we going to do? Then my daughter died from infection from the hospital. I lost 3 people in an 8-year period. I ain't got no criminal record. I work. I'm in 40 years of my job. I ain't never been arrested. I've been a prototype. I owe no man nothing. I kiss nobody's rear end. And I believe in supreme being. I try to raise my children the same way. And my baby boy wasn't perfect. I trust nobody to make no mistakes. I could walk the street being a man. And I want my babies and my grandbabies to be the same way. The only thing we want is fairness and justice. That's the only thing we want for the criminal system, fairness and justice. No more, no less. You know, I appreciate that Ms. Dudley is doing this out of the kindness of her heart, because I wouldn't have the patience for it. I didn't believe in carrying a gun, but I'm locked and loaded now. But I don't want to see nobody else lose their children. Because you can sit there and say this and that, but next time that violence, it might come to your friend or your family. And that has a ripple effect. And just like the young man said, you live this every day of your life. I'd rather for that have been me in that street to see my baby. My wife and my daughter and my son is more valuable. Yeah. That's all I got to say.
Mr. Brown, we extend our deepest condolences, and all of your testimonies have been incredibly powerful. There's somebody watching right now who knows exactly what happened to your son. And they have to have the courage to come forth and tell the truth, because it's not too late. And it's important for everyone watching to understand that this doesn't stop. This nightmare doesn't stop. It keeps going. What somebody did to your family is continuing to hurt you right now. Each of you. There's no way there's a party with 700 people at the Ritz and your son is murdered and more than 50 people know exactly what happened to your child. On Labor Day weekend, middle of the day, somebody knows exactly what happened. Please.
Thanks. Also, I want
Very close to your mic. I don't want anybody to miss anything you're saying.
I also want to add, like Mr. Brown was saying, I lost my whole family. The whole family is gone. I have one sister left that I do take care of. But I had a brother named Christopher Burrows. He was murdered June 26, 2012? No, 2013 in Kennedy Heights Park. There was witnesses to that too. Again, some of them people I see every day. I'm trying to get them to speak up. Even pointed it out to the policemen. And, you know, they just don't feel safe. They don't want to speak. They don't want to feel safe. They just don't feel safe at all. So that's like Mr. Brown said, you know, when you rather for it to be you than any of your loved ones. You definitely rather for it to be you because your loved ones are more important. I mean, it's just been a hard life. I mean, my family been through it. They've been through it. I mean, whereas as far as my parents, my brothers, sisters, everybody passed away. Except for I got that one sister, they just, you know, murdered my brother. So me and her, we're trying to hang on to each other. But people just need to feel safe. I don't know how you go about doing it. I just think as adults, we need to take these streets back. We have to let them know that we're not afraid of them. I mean, someone has to step forward because they're feeding on fear. That's what they feed on. They feed on fear, and it's a shame where we're in a society where adults are afraid of the children. Well, most adults act like children, but when adults are afraid, you know, their own kids, I just think that's just a bad situation. You know, someone needs to step forward and just let them know that we're taking these streets back, period. Because I don't know how long it's going to keep going like this and nothing to change until someone steps forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kevin Flynn, Vice Chair, any comments?
Just thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing these gentlemen here today. And I know when we had the mothers of some murdered boys, some good did come out of it. So keep your faith. I ask the citizens that know what happened, please step forward. You'll be protected and justice will be done.
Councilmember Yvette Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want to thank you for inviting these men to be here. You know, I don't know that there's anything that any of us could say that's going to bring the peace that you need. I do believe that justice is called for. I pray that for all of your situations. I can't imagine. I just can't even begin to imagine what you go through every single moment of every single day. And what's sad to me, and I think to all of us, is that you represent, each of you, hundreds of men who have and are going through this very same thing. And so what I would say is this, to the community that is watching, we have a responsibility to say what we know, to care for our community, to understand what fair is. We can't protect people who do things like this. And that's what we're doing when we don't come forward. To my community, to my family out there who is watching, come forward. You know, and you've got to leave the rest to God. He will protect them. But the right thing has to happen here. And I pray that that day comes for each of you, that you will know what happened and that you can have peace. If that day never comes, I pray that you have peace nonetheless. And so to the extent that there are things that our police department can continue to do, I want to reassure people that it's never too late, that people can be brought to justice for these things 8, 10, 15 years later, that don't think that it was 8 years ago and it's just too late now. It's never too late. and that you might just be saving someone else's son by bringing these people to justice who are, as far as we know, still very much out there, not ever having to pay for what they committed. I want to thank Mr. Burrows. I met you a few years ago when we were doing the liquor license case for the Ritz. And you were one of just a few. Actually, you might have been the only person that came and was brave enough to testify. And because of your testimony, we were able to recommend to the state that the liquor license be revoked. And now the place is shut down. And so do believe that your words matter. All of you believe that your words matter. And I believe that by you being here, even if it doesn't result in your own victory, that I believe minds will change and hearts will change and it will matter for someone else. So I just pray for all of you. And I would ask to our chair if there is anything that we can do above and beyond what we're doing, and I would love for our police department to help us figure that out, that we should do that. Thank you.
Councilmember Winburn.
First of all, let me thank each and every one of you all for coming. Some of you all I know personally, and I really appreciate your coming, and my heart goes out to you. And I often see Hope Dudley when my mother was carried out about 50-some years ago. She was there, and I wanted Hope and others to know I'm going to be there with you on this. And as I was sitting here listening to the brother, he was talking about, you know, it's not about Democrat or Republican, but especially in our community, especially in the African-American community where I grew up at, is that some of our leaders are going to have to stop making excuses for other blacks that do this to other black people or to do it to anyone. I have a problem with that. And then as a result of that, people don't want to speak up. They don't want to talk. They feel that it's an honor, it's a dishonor to snitch and to really speak up. And hopefully today, Mr. Chairman, that as a result of these three testimonies, somebody is listening, and we will hopefully have more information to assist with this matter. I wanted to ask the police department, what's the status on each one of these cases? Do we have any more information do you have any data on any of these cases as far as, like I heard the gentleman in the middle, he was saying no one has contacted him at all. And do you know anything about these three cases?
Mr. Winburn, I do not, but I will ensure you that we'll look into them.
I really have a concern, and those who know me, I am pro-police. I've always supported police, will continue to support them. Probably one of the strongest advocates for police here on this council. But when I hear citizens say that nobody contacted them, you know, that is quite disturbing to me, because it could be my son, it could be your son, or it could be someone else's son. And that is quite disturbing to me, that no one has contacted him at all. You know, every life that is involved in situations like this has value and of importance. So I would hope that, Mr. Chairman, that we could get, if these cases have not been resolved, that we could get the appropriate updates on assisting them. In the last meeting, I think we talked about using the drug asset forfeiture money. Can we use some of that money to help pay for witnesses and do what we need to do to help resolve these cases? So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have to say, and my heart goes out to each and every one of you all, and thank you all for coming today.
Before you go, again, right to left, just the facts. Your son was murdered on what date, name of your son, and the location, so that as people are watching this hearing, they have that information, and that the next presentation after your presentations is Crime Stoppers. Understand, behind you right now, the chief of police and his staff are right behind you right now. Chief Blackwell, the brass is here. So let's go from right to left and give us the basic facts so that people know exactly when and where your sons were murdered.
My name is Illy Burrows. My son Dexter Burrows was murdered May 16th, 2010, inside the Club Ritz. And also, I need to speak out on my brother also, Christopher Burrows. He was murdered June 26, 2012, in Kennedy Heights Park.
Mr. Burrows, thank you so much for your testimony. And absolutely, we extend our deepest condolences to your family. Mr. Jones?
My name is Terry Jones. My son is Jason Terry Wynn. He was murdered March 1st, 2006 in Avondale on Forest Avenue and back of a church across from Fleshman Park. Jason was shot, he was robbed and shot. He stumbled out onto the street and died right on the street with lots and lots of people around, buses and stuff going past. 3 guys who shot him ran away. And that was it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Again, we extend our condolences and anyone who is watching. And we know there are people that are watching. This is replayed over and over throughout the week. They know exactly what happened. And they owe it to all 3 of your families to come forward with the information. They owe it. Mr. Brown.
Name is Samuel Brown, Jr. My son is Samuel Brown III. It was September the 4th, 2006, between the hours of 5 and 5:30. Now the address is the front of a recreational park. I'm not sure, they got the address is 3587 Haven Street. That's right there between Forest by the zoo and Irma Avenue.
Mr. Brown, Sam was murdered in the middle of the day.
Middle of the day.
5 to 5:30, you said.
Right, children playing in the park. Yeah, when the gunman shot and killed my son.
I want to thank all 3 of you for your testimony, and I hope you don't leave. Ms. Dudley, thank you so much for reaching out. Please, I want you to come forward. If you all will make room. Oh, you have a mic. Thank you. Please.
What I'd like to say is, I would like the families to be able to have a notification before the press release goes out on the homicide, and they not find out that their loved one was murdered by watching a television. I also would like more families to be signed up for victims' compensation since they freeze the 2-year. Mr. Jones' family was signed up after 4 years. A family shouldn't have to wait 4 years for the victims' compensation. I like families to also be able to sign up for the VINE, victims' information and notification 24 hours a day. Our program does not receive any kind of homicide key or next of kin. Families actually reach out to us in order for us to support them. There's no kind of information or flyer that a family can pass out in the streets or any kind of card that says, call Crime Stoppers, my son's been murdered. So I would like families to be able to be equipped with information that they can actually give the people in the community to say, call this number, my son's been murdered. Our grant allows us $4,000. And we print every dime of it. But I work a second job in order to make sure that we can put information into the Justice Center and into the prisons. I would actually like the community to work toward doing these things. Like the families have said, they have lost loved ones on this journey called justice. In September, I became ill and had to have a pacemaker. So a lot of families that we have supported have actually moved on. We also like to, if it's been a homicide, the family sign some kind of permission slip giving us permission to be able to send information of unsolved homicides into prison. So those things right there will actually help support the families and bring more awareness to the crime that's happening in our community. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dudley, and thank all of fathers and grandfathers for your testimony, and we appreciate so much you coming forward and continuing to have the courage to come forward. You know, the last time we had this, 2 men were arrested based on a murder that happened just a week and a half ago. So this is a very powerful tool here. Please know that what you're saying, there were so many people. I'm just going back to the Ritz, not just to focus on that, but you know, out of 700 people, even if 3 people came forward, there was another 50 people there that know everything about it. And one of the things I know about being black is folks talk all the time. We are a word of mouth community, verbal. That hadn't changed one bit. We are oral. So people were yakking about all 3 of these situations. And they heard people talking about it. And they know exactly who did it. And I'm going to end by saying 0 tolerance for this behavior. I've gotten some pushback lately. You know, in our community, we like to define who's black and who's not black by our advocacy. This is a 0 tolerance. I don't want to hear anybody on a radio station talking about this is okay and giving excuses about it. I don't want to hear about the child's economic situation or how hard their life was. I don't want to get on my soapbox, but it's crazy out here. And I constantly hear the excuses. We're not here talking about somebody stole some bubble gum. We're talking about people's lives were taken. People were murdered. And I don't want to hear anything about, I don't want to snitch. This is about coming forth and being an American citizen and cooperating with our police department and providing information about murder. And there's a 0 tolerance. This committee, since we've been here, we've been talking about murder. That's what we've been talking about, murder. We haven't even gotten into the petty crime stuff. We're dealing with murder. And all the lives that they took from their children, grandchildren, fathers, mothers, and all of that, they can't get back. It's gone. The only little thing somebody can do is come forward with some information and share what happened. And we're going to bring Crime Stoppers up, and I don't want you all to leave. I want you to, I know you all know about Crime Stoppers, but if you have some time, sit here and hear their testimony. So as they come forward, we say, here is a tool where you can provide anonymous information about what is happening in our community. And all the urban myths that continue to go out there. Well, I can't call Crime Stoppers because they're going to know who I am. Nobody's going to know who you are by calling Crime Stoppers. And people are going to hear that testimony as you all go back to your seats and Crime Stoppers comes forward. We thank all of you for your courage. I've got 4 sons, 5 children, 1 girl. This is my reality. This is my reality. I'm looking at you guys going, this could be me. Because of the craziness, my son just walking down the street and somebody decides I'm going to rob him for his phone. I'm going to rob him for his tennis shoes. I'm going to rob him for his laptop and kill him in the street, broad daylight, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, by a park, taking a child behind a church and murdering him, killing somebody in a doggone club while people are partying and dancing. See, that's the reality of this human experience. And we have too many black folks who are making excuses for the behavior. That's part of the problem. That's part of the cancer that we're talking about. Not white folks making excuses, black folks making excuses for the problems. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the mothers and their pain, the fathers, the grandfathers, everybody in their pain. And we have a cancer in our community where we've got folks wanting to make excuses and wanting to say it's okay. It's not okay. There's nothing okay about this testimony. And I'm not going to let them get off the hook and say, oh, it's okay to not come forward with the information. It's wrong. They have to come forward if they're a human being. If they have any humanity in their bodies, they would come forward and share the information. We thank you all so deeply for your testimony. Crime Stoppers.
Yeah,
Councilmember Wimber.
Mr. Chairman, these 3 individuals and the last individuals that came, could we have, not that we want to keep bringing them back, but I really want to have follow-up on this, and I think this is a good meeting, and this is the first time I've ever seen a council where we had this type of support and opportunity to take testimony. So I just want to let you all know we appreciate you coming, but we want to follow up and follow through to see if we can help you to the end on this thing. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman.
There was also some recommendations that were provided by Ms. Dudley, and I put out the request that if there were things that we could do, that we do that. And so I'd be happy to put something together. We can work together on a motion we could direct to the administration for feedback on the suggestions that she provided. So I wrote those down. We can also follow up with you to make sure we've got it correct. But if there are things that we can do to the tune of what you've suggested, and clearly you're the expert here, we'd like to be able to try to follow up on that. So I can, my office can put something together. We'll circulate it to everyone, and then of course communicate with you to make sure it's accurate and get a report back from the administration on all of your recommendations.
Thank you, Councilmember Simpson. And our office is working on all of those recommendations. Have your staff. I think it's a good thing. Have your staff work with our office on it so we can introduce it on Wednesday and bring it in. That's the point of law and public safety, so that we actually can make public policy that makes sense. You all, thank you so much for your testimony. Crime Stoppers, Captain Elliot Isaac, Lieutenant Martin Mack. If you all would please come forward, Chief Blackwell, and anyone else. We've heard some powerful testimony here, and if you weren't impacted and riveted by what you just heard, I don't think anything's going to move you. But now what we're going to talk about is Crime Stoppers, and the next subject matter, Councilmember Winburn at the last meeting raised that he wanted to hear about asset forfeiture, so that's on the agenda due to your recommendation. We thank all of you so much for taking the time to come and present here at Law and Public Safety. We are very thankful for Crime Stoppers and all of the work that Crime Stoppers does in our community, and you have the floor. Chief Blackwell, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Smitherman, and I just want to say I'm going to talk about the asset forfeiture, but I wanted to come up now to thank you and the committee for allowing Mr. Burrows, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Brown to give their testimonies about what has happened in their lives. And I just want to remind the committee and yourself that the police department, we live through these tragedies every day, and they never go away. We remember each one, and we certainly do our best to bring closure and to make arrests. And I want to reiterate and echo your sentiments about the no snitch mentality. I think if anyone knows me by now, they know everywhere I go, that's the first thing I talk about with young people or old people, is the fact that we have to eradicate the no snitch mentality and stop making excuses, because it is not okay. It's absolutely not okay that we've had 331 homicides in the last 5 years in Cincinnati, nearly 15,000 last year in the United States alone. So we definitely have to eradicate the no snitch mentality. We have to develop more solid relationships in the community, more trusting relationships. We have to get those guns out of the wrong hands that are in too many of our neighborhoods. And we will address all of those homicide protocols, notification systems. We are working on that right now, so you will have a word on our new procedures very quickly, very shortly. And I wanted to say that. And also, we do have Crime Stoppers money on each one of these cases, and we'll add $5,000 to each case to see if we can't get
Go back through that, Hope Dudley. Did you hear that? Chief, would you say that again so everybody hears that?
I realize that we already have Crime Stoppers money committed to each one of these cases, but I want to add $5,000 to each case so that we can get somebody to come forward. It is really unfortunate that we have to pay people to do the right thing, but if we do, we will. And if this starts it, let's start it. So I wanted to announce that, and I'll let them talk about Crime Stoppers.
Thank you so much, Chief.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dave Bailey. I'm the Assistant Chief in charge of the Investigative Bureau, which, as you know, takes on homicides. Let me first talk about, and just kind of add to what the Chief said, the no snitch mentality, basically, in my opinion, really does breed this violence. When we go down to homicide, we talk to our investigators, same names come up, and more often than not, when we walk out of the room, we believe that they've been involved in several homicides. Once somebody kills, there's no reason to believe they're going to stop. So by not snitching, we let these people run around and commit more violence. That's absolutely wrong. That mentality needs to stop. I remember one time I was doing a live shot at 5 o'clock. We had a shooting over Winton Terrace, and there were some encouraging things that I remember coming out and saying, you know, there was many folks standing on the corner that saw this happen. We need somebody to reach out. About 5 minutes later, we got a phone call that said, hey, we don't want a uniform to come to our door, but can you send an investigator to the door? We did that. We solved that homicide within 2 hours. So those things are encouraging. We do see that. We're just telling folks it needs to stop. What we heard here today, and the families have our condolences from the police department, but what you're hearing is far too common. When I go down to homicide and we sit and we talk about these cases every so often, we go and have breakfast in the morning. Tell me about your case. Homicide investigators will talk about the case, and more often than not, especially last year, you know, we hit a run, especially on the west side of homicides, where the investigators basically will tell you this: we know who did it. We know who was standing there. We're not able to get these people to come forward to put this case together. And one of these cases we heard here today is pretty much what happened, that people saw it, they were standing there, we know who did it, and we can't put it together because we don't have a witness that will come to court. And more often than not, when we can't close them, that's the primary reason. And that's the frustration we have from the homicide investigators. And I think a couple weeks ago, you know, we did a major operation where we took some gang members, and I think some of you saw the video. And this was really troublesome. I know you saw the video, Mr. Smitherman, where we have a gang member sitting in the back of a police car bragging about how he reached out and touched people and nobody ever comes to court on him. That's the epitome of what we're dealing with. That's what needs to stop, and those are the people we need to remove from society. So that's where we're at. I know personally when I was in District 5, I was out there for about 5 years. I don't know if you remember Johnny Harris got killed on Fergus Avenue in 2007. Never did solve that one. He was robbed and shot. His mom still calls me all the time. She runs around with the flyers like this, but still calls me. So I want to put a shout out for that one. If anybody knows anything about the Johnny Harris homicide, please come forward, or any homicide. That's what we're here for today. You've got information. We know people have information. Come forward. I've had folks call me, give us information. We can make sure you remain anonymous. We can do that. We will do that. We respect people. We're not gonna put you out there in front. So that's my spiel. Let's get to Crime Stoppers a little bit. As you can see here, it's a regional organization. It encompasses counties adjacent to us in Indiana and Kentucky. It's been around since 1980. The big thing here is what we talked about today. You can provide information on crimes or suspects without having to reveal your identity. That's as simple as a call. The Crime Stoppers 352-3040, or there's ways that you can text us a tip, and no tip is too small. Give us a nickname. Matter of fact, we had a homicide where somebody managed to get a nickname, and we were able to get our real-time crime center within minutes to determine who that was, and we made an arrest. So the sooner we get that information, we can start putting the pieces together and solve these things. So what I want to reiterate here is no information is too small. If you think it's insignificant, it's going to be significant to us, and we may be looking for that piece of information. So I implore anybody, if you have a little bit, call. Get a number, call our investigator. That might be the one piece we're looking for that just breaks the case wide open. Not really a police organization or a media program, although we use those vehicles to make it work. It's a partnership with the community, the media, and law enforcement to get the word out and to get people engaged. The way it's funded is Crime Stoppers is a not-for-profit organization. They got a board that meets regularly. They evaluate how we're doing, if we're staying on track, number of arrests, what type of rewards we're going to pay out. That's ongoing. Board of Directors enhanced community involvement, and it's been a successful program. Our Crime Stoppers program has probably been one of the most successful programs in the country, many, many years running. Board of Directors advise, they govern. You can see that. Currently, Gene Farrar is the president of our local Crime Stoppers Board of Directors. If you remember, Gene was the chief of the University of Cincinnati before he retired. So now he administers the Crime Stoppers programs, and they have all types of events to raise money and so forth. The rewards are private donations, fundraising, donations from outside tax base. Tax dollars aren't involved, although we do commit support staff to administer Crime Stoppers within the police department. We have one sworn and one non-sworn personnel that operate the program. Since 1990, Crime Stoppers received funding from Senate Bill 65. All police agencies put into the pot, so to speak, and that's based on auctions of stolen property and so forth. We give a percentage of that to the Crime Stoppers program. And as I said before, staffing-wise, Cincinnati Police Department provides one sworn and one non-sworn to field calls and take care of the administrative processes of the program. What's the objectives? Pretty simple. Get people engaged, give us information about apprehending criminals, recovering stolen property, and sometimes drug operations. The biggest thing is to motivate the public to cooperate with law enforcement, and it's the flow of information, and that's the important thing here. If I can, if anything, I've always said we're not going to simply just arrest our way out of some of the problems we have. The best way for us to deal with many of the things that are coming up, and the way policing is going now is how well you manage the information coming into the police department intelligence-wise, and more importantly, how well do you communicate that outside with your stakeholders in the neighborhoods, which are the people that can help you. We got Citizens on Patrol, we got social media sites. You got a lot of people out there that can help you. So it's how well you can get that information out of the police department too. And certainly we circulate materials that help people in getting us tips, getting us information. The next sheet's the statistics. I won't go through each one of them, but As you can see, the alarming one I see here is the homicides solved since 2011. Those have been declining, so we do need people engaged to help us solve the homicides. And that's the one we're really trying to work on. We recently moved the Crime Stoppers operation back to our CIS, where we got a little bit more 24-hour control over that situation, because what we found out is that if somebody does call in, you get that one hot call, you might want to reach out to an investigator right now, or get somebody on the phone. It's much easier for us to do at the CIS desk, where we got somebody there 24 hours a day, because it's just like anything else. When the iron's hot, you really need to strike. So if somebody's going to call, we might want to get somebody on there on that phone and get some details. So we moved it back to CIS. That'll take place Wednesday. And when you look at the payouts have decreased a little bit over the years. You can go on to the next slide. I guess we're not going on the next slide.
It's not moving.
Are we?
It's not.
All right, and basically, if we want to talk about overall crime reduction strategy, Crime Stoppers really is a support function to our overall crime strategy. What we envision someday down the road is basically we expand the real-time crime center, and part of that real-time crime operation will be Crime Stoppers and tip information coming in 24 hours a day. At the same time, we'd be looking at cameras and license plate readers and all the intelligence assets we have in place. And basically, at the point of these things occurring, when the shots gets fired or when we get these hot runs, that we're able to triage them right away. You got somebody, a technician, so to speak, that's monitoring all these things, putting all the pieces together and getting people rolling where they need to be going. And we're also using, a couple months ago, we started integrating some civilian personnel to help us answer the phones during the peak times. We got a lot of our civilians that want to help out. They don't necessarily want to be citizens on patrol. What can we do? Well, help us with the Crime Stoppers. A lot of times when we go out live and we put something out there, we get an influx of calls. So we're bringing some of our civilians in to help us there. I envision as we move forward to this real-time crime concept that we'll be bringing civilians in to help us around the clock and get through some of these things. But pretty much that's the state of Crime Stoppers at this point, and I can entertain any questions you might have.
Does any of the members of the committee have?
Mr. Chair, I have two quick questions, or maybe three. I guess the first question is, so in the first 48 hours, which I've heard is the kind of the critical time after a crime happens, how are citizens, advocates from the community engaged in helping to get the word out to the community that you're looking for information? So I know that you all have a procedure. For a lot of people in the community, the police, they're fearful to talk to the police, but they might be more willing to speak to a community advocate, a civilian, someone else, so that they don't have the perception of cooperating with the police. Are citizens at all engaged in going out into a community, doing a scour of a community within the first 48, talking to people and trying to convince them to bring forward evidence? Or if not, then when does that part happen?
Typically what we're doing now is when those incidents happen, within those first 24, we're going out doing the neighborhood canvas and getting the word out, and that's pretty much done all the time. That it's a door-to-door, and whatever social media sites we can use to get the word out. Quite honestly, we could probably use some enhancement in that regard to get folks engaged and urge them to come forward. And of course, we do use the media to that, to our advantage when we can do that.
Mr. Chair, so have you all investigated or attempted to have civilians go out and do that with you? So I can see where, I grew up in Lincoln Heights, I think everybody knows that. I can see where if the police are scouring in the first 24 hours, it's hot, people are afraid that maybe the person who did it is paying attention to where the police are going. Are citizens or community advocates, like folks who, like Ms. Dudley or others, are they encouraged to go out and actually do this advocacy in a because they might be perceived as more safe, or is this just a police function in the first 24, 48 hours?
Well, the first 24 to 48, primarily police. As we go on, the neighborhood officers are pushing out at the street level. Of course, SERV has its street level component that will take it to the streets as well and try to garner information at that level. A lot of times it's as simple as getting a phone call. Usually, when we solve these, a phone call will come in within the first day or so, and that's what will lead us to crack the case. We had a shooting just last week of a taxi driver, and I can't really go into too much about it, but suffice it to say that these people were apprehended. They're apprehended because somebody did come forward, and combined with technology, and of course, I can't go into too much of that, but when you start putting those things together, and I will tell you, that was the benefit of that shred of evidence, that somebody calls in and says, hey, I heard. That's good enough. I heard is enough to put somebody in the right direction, start capturing some other data, and then all of a sudden at the end of the day you have a case and 2 people are in jail rather quickly. I will say in 2014 we have closed a lot of these cases, but it's a small consequences for a number of things that have occurred so far this year. But I'm encouraged. We've had some cooperation in 2014 that we didn't have in 2013. If I would have been sitting here this time last year, and I made my trip over to homicide, and I looked at all these cases that are wide open, and just like I told you before, we know who did it. We even know who was standing there. We cannot put a case together. That's the aggravating thing from my perspective, and for the homicide investigators, that's really aggravating. To know you're running around, you know who did this, you just can't piece it together because you can't get the right person to come forward.
I'd like to encourage, if this is something that can be received, so I do a lot of advocacy around women who are in abusive relationships, and I've actually been called after a woman who has been in that situation to go to her and talk to her and to walk her to the police station, walk her to the safe spot to be picked up. And sometimes I believe that having non-police officers who can go into scour a community and talk to people who might have been witnesses and go with them and let them know what the protocol is and help them understand that they're going to be safe, particularly during that critical decision-making point right early on, could be helpful. So to the extent that we have the resources to do that, and maybe we've seen models other places, or if not, to create one, where we could have trusted individual in the community that can do that work alongside you, it might be helpful. I mean, I think, for instance, if in that case, rather than having a civilian do that, you had a police officer do that, I don't know how many women would be feeling comfortable going to the police to report being battered.
And I certainly think that would be a huge asset, but when you look at it from our perspective, I told you the story about Winton Terrace, that they called up and said, I don't want one of his uniform, and obviously we don't want to do that if we wanted to, but send me a plainclothes officer. Well, that's a step down, but they still recognize that may be the police going to the door. So, we don't want to draw attention, but certainly we do want people to come forward any way they can. As for today, the 3 cases you saw here today, I know Mr. Winburn brought it up, that as we were talking, we were calling down the homicide, pulling those cases up through the Colts case, taking a look at them. If nothing more, to affirm some of the things that you heard today and maybe take a look at some things from a cold case perspective. So those cases are being brought up. We will reach out and make contact from the homicide with our families. We'll do that today. That was being done. I was on the phone back there before. That's being done. Where do we go going forward? We're setting up a gang unit. Part of that gang unit will have a heavy a federal impact, a federal partnership with it. The advantage is, some of these cases can be addressed through the federal proffering system. When some of our people wind up in the federal system and they're looking at substantial sentences, that would be the time that we can basically bring these up and say, hey, maybe you can help yourself and maybe you need to talk about some of these things. And we think we can capture some of that through an aggressive debriefing program with some of the people we arrest that are looking at stiff sentences. So that'll be expanded as we move forward. And I did like the idea I heard today of sending this information to the prisons. I think if we amplify that and get some of these cold cases out to the prison system, maybe somebody will be compelled to come forward and say, hey, I do know something about this. I think there is some merit to that, which I think is a great idea. And certainly we'll take any suggestions that you might have.
Okay. My final question is about this issue of protection. So it seems like the critical issue is that people are concerned that they might be hurt and that they don't trust that they're going to be rightly protected. And I know you can't reveal all the ways that we do that, but are there things that you can say to the community that's listening to assure them that there are means, measures in place to ensure that people, if they come forward, will be protected?
You know, within the police department, we do have ways of relocating for a minimal amount of time. We can do that. We have funding, pursuit funds that can do that. The idea of permanent relocation is beyond our control, but certainly if they do come forward, we do have a means of taking care of them. And we can relocate temporarily if need be. We have done that in the past. You know, and those are things we do, but, you know, like I said before, not coming forward creates a much more dangerous situation than coming forward. And like I said, that, you know, some of these folks we know, they didn't stop at one homicide. We know that they've been involved in many.
Thank you all very much. Let's just kind of go through some just basic information. If somebody wants to get a hold of Crime Stoppers, they've heard this testimony, they know about just a little piece of information. They don't know the whole thing. Maybe they were at a party, maybe they were in a park, they heard somebody talking about something. That might be helpful. They don't know. What number do they call?
You know.
Crime Stoppers number is 352-3040. The phone lines are manned 24 hours a day, so if they call, they will be able to talk with someone, give them the information on the crime that they are aware of.
So they call the 352-3040 number, which is Crime Stoppers, and when they call that line, what happens? What does the exchange look like? They don't want anybody to know who they are. They just want to give some information to kind of get us heading in the right direction. What does that conversation look like? Make it plain for the public.
When someone calls the Crime Stoppers number, they talk to a call taker on the other end. That call taker will then ask questions regarding the crime that the person is calling about. They will ask dates, times, locations, those kind of things, any detailed information that they may have. That call taker or the caller is then given a code number. We don't ask for any name. We don't have caller ID information on them.
Let's slow down right here. Let's go through this. What I want to do is just spend a minute breaking down the process, which I think helps educate and takes out the fear. When they call 352-3040, and there are people that are watching us right now who know about crimes that have happened. So they could call right now because it's 24 hours a day and somebody will answer that phone. That person doesn't ask, what's your name? Who are you? They don't do that, right?
That is correct. No name, no number.
And there's no caller ID on that phone for you all to be able to determine who's on the other side of that line. Nobody's going, hey, let's hit a button and follow up on who just made that call. That doesn't happen.
That's correct. There is no caller ID information.
That ID number that you give, right? That number that is provided to that person. Let's say that their tip leads to the conviction, right? Let's just go to the money. You know, I agree with Chief Blackwell. Wish it didn't have to come to money and people would just step up and do the right thing. But the reality is that there's money here. That person now says they want to collect the money, right? What does that process look like?
Every month, the Crime Stoppers Board, they will attach a certain amount of dollars to a tip. Then at the end of the month, there is a date that is given out with our media partners on when the payout will be for crimes or tips that were received in a certain time frame. When that happens, the caller is asked to call back. They will give their tip number, and we will tell them where they can pick up the funds at. There's no one there that's tracking who's picking it up. All you do is give that tip number to the person with the payout, and then they will give you the payout.
So let's say that payout is $2,000. Just want to make this real easy. It's $2,000. Do they have to report that to the IRS?
No, all the information is anonymous.
So again, to the public, there isn't a breakdown in the anonymous part of Crime Stoppers. No one has to, at the end of the year say, hey, I got this check from Crime Stoppers IRS, and I need to disclose that to the IRS. Or if they wanted to meet somebody in the mall and have an exchange of an envelope with a number, no one has to know. You all don't care, right? You're not trying to track down anyone who's providing and cooperating through Crime Stoppers. Is that true?
That's true. And the money that's paid out in cash, so there's no tracing of a check or anything like that.
So this is cash money. It's all by some anonymous ID. The phone 352-3040 is open 24 hours a day. People who heard the testimony, right, of Mr. Burrows, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Jones, if they know anything about those murders, just those 3 examples, they could call 352-3040 now. They'd be given this anonymous number to put our professional police department on track to find out who did it. And from that information, you might put together a case, so you don't need to have somebody come, because they're putting you on the right track to actually identify who did the murder. Is there any period of time that elapses in the law? And I think my colleague, Councilmember Simpson, spoke to that as it relates to murder, meaning is there some time period where tracking somebody down, a murder that happened in 2006 as an example, we can still go back, find somebody, prosecute them as it relates to murder? There is no time period. Is that correct with murder?
That's correct. There is no statute of limitations on the murder charge.
So I don't have any other questions. I think it's important that we just baby step, and I'm going to bring Crime Stoppers back in. This isn't the only time you all are coming. I'm going to make sure that we continue to give the visibility, because this is a very important tool to the police department that we've got to highlight, so that we're breaking down those walls of fear, a lot of urban myths out there, so we have to keep attacking that so people know this is a real way. I know there's somebody who was at the Ritz, for example. They know everything about the Burrows case. They know the exact person who did that murder at the Ritz, period. I don't need to hear from anybody. You got 700 people in a club, and somebody's dead on the floor while people are dancing. There's no way somebody doesn't know about that. But they could call 352-3040 right now. You heard Mr. Brown say, right, over Labor Day weekend, 5 to 5:30, September 4th, 2006, right in the middle of the street by a park, somebody murdered his son. To me, it's impossible for someone to not know what happened. That is absolutely impossible. And for Mr. Jones, on March the 1st, 2006, his son murdered. Taking someone to a bus stop, he's taken behind a church that's abandoned and murdered. His son walks out, stumbles out into the public. But the reality is that somebody knows about those 3 murders. And what we want to do here is use this committee to put pressure to raise the consciousness for somebody to pick up the phone and call about the testimony that they've just heard. So they can call 352-3040 right now, and you have outlaid an anonymous process for someone to give a tip and be a human being and tell us what in the world happened. I thank you all so much. Would you like to add any more to your testimony?
I think it's all been said. I think there's been a lot of good ideas, a lot of good information sharing here today. I heard it from one of your folks here to testify today. We got to take back our neighborhoods. And when you look at it, we've done a lot of good work in our neighborhoods. You look at some of the things we've done over the past 10 years in our neighborhoods, and really our attitude should be, we're not going to let this happen. We're moving forward, and we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior. So any type of information you have, any way you can get it to us, certainly Crime Stoppers is preferred, and we would urge people to use that service. But anybody, you can call me, whatever we need to do to get that information, we'll certainly accommodate and make that happen. And that's what I want to get out there, that this needs to be done.
And if somebody wants to make a contribution to Crime Stoppers, they just are hearing us, and they're compelled. Like, you know, my good friend Reverend Charlie Winburn on Sunday, you know, he's passing the basket saying the church doors are open, come and let's save somebody. But somewhere in there he says, I need some money here to pay the bills. So Crime Stoppers has overhead. Probably is very low. But if somebody out here says, I want to write a check, meaning I don't have a tip, I don't know anything about a murder, but this is important to our community that this institution be here and that purse monies be available. And I agree absolutely with our Chief Blackwell, that we wish this wasn't the case. How do they make a contribution to Crime Stoppers, and who do they make their checks payable to?
If they wanted to make a tip or a contribution to Crime Stoppers, they can contribute by calling 513-263-8230. That's
263-8230 for someone who wants to make a contribution to Crime Stoppers. And do they make the check payable to Crime Stoppers?
They would make the check payable to Crime Stoppers, to my knowledge. They can also go to Crime Stoppers' website, which is www.crime-stoppers.us.
So you all don't turn away any money of anybody that says that we want to support Crime Stoppers. You don't turn, I see it, you don't turn any money away, do you?
We don't turn anything away.
That's right.
We'll take help, money, whatever you can give us. But I think just having us here today to bring this issue to the forefront, that's going to be a big help. At least now we know our Law and Public Safety Committee is very, very committed to this, and this will help us out a great deal, get this word out.
And thank you all so much for your testimony. And I want to end by saying, look, this might be every quarter, meaning we're going to be on this, continuing to bring you forth to give this testimony all over again so that everybody knows what the process is, right? So thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. And I say that on behalf of all of our committee members. We really appreciate you coming forth, and we appreciate the work that you do. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Chief Blackwell, asset forfeiture, and as Chief, as you come forward, let me just commend your officers publicly for the great work that they do and you in the city of Cincinnati. And this committee supports your work. We could support your officers, and I'm going to continue to repeat that over and over and over again. We had a cab driver that was murdered, and every murder catches my attention. I've asked the city manager to notify the chair every time there's a murder. I want to know, and I don't care what time it is. If it's 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, responding back. Now, my style isn't that I'm driving out to crime scenes, because we have a professional team that can handle all that. So I don't need to act like I'm coming out here for some media shot regarding what's happening on a crime scene. But I'm certainly sending message as the chair that we're supporting. We want to know that cab driver murder, right? All the murders capture my imagination. But see, no matter where you're chairing, when you start killing cab drivers and you say you want to recruit somebody to come to the city, basic transportation, right? You're trying to do economic development, and cab drivers are being murdered. That's absolutely crazy, and it just shows you kind of where society is going. And it's my understanding that the cab driver, and I don't know if this might be an urban myth, and that's why I want to ask the chief, is that the cab driver didn't have $10 on him. Like, the reality here is that they murdered and took somebody's life for less than $10. Less than $10, committee. This was a man who was a father, had children, was working, was sending money home, minding his business. And two people got in his cab or got around his cab, whatever they did, I wasn't on the scene, whatever the details are, and took his life. What I want to thank you all for doing is catching them. That's what I want to thank our police department for. I want to thank you for finding them and catching them. And now I hope that the whole power of the law comes down on them. I hope that they never see the light of day. I hope that they're at a minimum that they are in prison forever. That when you take somebody's life, the chairman of this committee is not going to have any mercy. I'm not going to sit here and talk about what their economic situation was, or did they graduate from school, do they have a GED, what programs were they in, what was their family life like. I'm not having that conversation when two people pick up a gun and kill somebody like that cab driver. Period. I just want to publicly thank all of your police officers, all of your detectives, everyone who got on that and caught those guys. And I hope that the whole power of every law, the judge, the judicial system, as strongly as I can say it, holds them accountable for their behavior. Chief, thank you so much for being here. And if you want to add anything to it, I just want to again thank you for catching them. Because see, we can't stop them every time for murdering somebody, and this committee gets that. We can't stop them, but we sure as hell can catch them. And see, the reality is that when we start catching them, they're going to get nervous. I've seen the police walking the beats. I don't know if you guys have seen them. I've seen them out walking down the street. That's the work of this committee and this council, and your work of identifying that $1 million and having that visibility. I'm seeing it as I'm driving around the streets. And we knew that there could be a spike up in murders in March, but I also see that we're holding it down, right? We're holding it down. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the work that you're doing and your staff, and I can't say enough about it. You have the floor regarding asset forfeiture and anything you'd like to add, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and officers do truly appreciate being recognized and thanked by our bosses, by all of you here in City Hall for a job well done. And Chief Bailey and Captain Isaac and their crew absolutely did a wonderful job on this case and putting it together very quickly and catching those two individuals in rapid fashion and putting them behind bars. So I'm very proud of them as well for their good work. And I share your sentiments when it comes to not making excuses and holding people in this community accountable for the violent acts, especially the violent acts of young people, the recklessness of the gang members and other teens and other youth that involve in predatory type crime that has the effect of holding an entire community hostage. So we are certainly aware of that and working on that before the weather breaks. We've put things in place, and hopefully we will have a significant impact on crime. That's our goal. Ellie, you want to start?
Mr. Chair, I'm Ellie Topham.
They're going to keep it on for you. Okay. Right now, you just press it so you can go, and then eventually it will go red. They're working on it right now, so you don't have to hold it.
I'm Ellie Topham. I'm the Finance Management Section Director for the Police Department, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our asset forfeiture funds and how important they are to the Police Department. Okay.
So everybody just wait. We're going to get the mic. Don't hold it. She's going to get it turned back on. Hold on 1 second. You're red. You're live now. And as long as you don't touch any of the buttons, it'll stay live. Thank you so much for being here.
The state and federal asset forfeiture programs were established to deter crime and to provide valuable additional resources to the law enforcement agencies. And Chief Blackwell's going to tell you a little bit about how we go about seizing those assets.
So when we, generally, Mr. Chair, our officers that are engaged in high-level investigative work are the ones that are responsible for the seizures. There are a lot of rules for certain surrounding what is seizable, what we are allowed to keep in that fund. But we try to do a very good job. We have our officers that are on various task forces with the federal government, ATF, FBI, and so forth, and that is largely responsible for our ability to be able to have seizure funds.
The federal asset forfeiture seizures actually started with the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. At that time, City Council established Fund 369, which held both state and federal seizure money. In 1994, the federal government required we set up a separate fund. So then we set up Fund 367. Federal asset forfeiture money is put into Fund 367. The state asset forfeiture money still goes into Fund 369, and that's under provisions of the Ohio Revised Code. The federal government gives us a guide to equitable sharing that we have to use in order to both take those monies in and use those monies. We also have the written internal control policy that was established as part of the requirements of the Ohio Revised Code. The revenues that we get each year fluctuate dramatically. The chart that I've prepared for you goes from 1994 to 2014, and you can see that it's very dramatic differences from year to year. That all depends on the activity of the police department. It depends on the court system and the time it takes us to get those assets released. You know, it varies a lot. You can see there 2008, we had very good years. We brought in almost $2.5 million in state seizures and almost $1 million in federal seizures. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. This slide shows you kind of the last 5 years of what's going on. Federal asset forfeiture has stayed fairly consistent at about $200,000 a year. But our state asset forfeiture seizures have gone from a high in 2011 of 1.5 to only 356,000 during the 6-month fiscal year 13. When you add 6 months of 14 to that, we're still at less than half of that 5-year annual average. So, you know, it's very hard to do any kind of planning for asset forfeiture money because the revenues are so erratic on that. Federal asset forfeiture to date for 2014, we've brought in $211,000. That's fiscal year 2014, so about 8 months. State asset forfeiture, we're under $400,000 for those 8 months. And that's really important because there are a number of expenditures that are critical to the police department that come out of asset forfeiture money. All asset forfeiture has to be expended for law enforcement purposes. That's in the rules. Our federal asset forfeiture, we now use exclusively for training and travel related to that training. All police officer training has been totally eliminated from our general fund budget because of the reducing general fund over the years. All of our officer training comes out of our federal asset forfeiture money. And like I said, that's in the neighborhood of maybe $200,000 a year. So if you're talking 1,000 officers, you're talking less than $200 an officer for training. Our state asset forfeiture requires that we use almost 20% for preventative drug education programs. If we had that $1.2 million annual average, that would be almost $240,000 a year. But like I said, that average isn't really there most of the time. We've brought in less than $400,000 this year, so that would be less than $80,000 that we'd have for community preventative drug education programs. The chief, however, has used more than $80,000 this year because he values those programs very highly. And he's done some significant things with them, including the programs that the department sponsors, such as our city camps and our Explorer program, and money to the new H3 Cincy program. This slide actually shows you all of the things that we expended money for or have money encumbered for from 2010 to 2014, just to give you an idea of where this money goes. As you can see there in the bold, the preventative drug education program by far is where most of the money goes, $1.2 million over this 5-year period. The items that are in blue there are items that are repetitive expenditures for us. The Victim and Witness Security Program, which Chief Bailey alluded to, where we can do some short-term security for witnesses. We give, on average, about $5,000 a year into that program. That's actually a program that was started by the county, and when they pulled their funding out of it, we picked it up and continued it out of our asset forfeiture funds. We have legal mandates for advertising that has to be done when we seize assets before we can sell it. That costs us about $20,000 a year on average. The police department's random drug testing program for our officers has always been paid for out of drug seizure money. It was initiated out of that fund when it started and has always been paid from that. So that's about $25,000 a year. We put on several citizens police academies a year to, again, try to increase our community relations. That's about $10,000. And the biggest recurring cost we have is our pursuit of criminal funds. We spend about $150,000 a year. That's your drug buy money, your witness, or your informant money, but about $30,000 to $40,000 of that goes directly to Crime Stoppers for their tips. So that's $210,000 of recurring costs. Like I said, this year we've only brought in $400,000. We've spent over $80,000 in the drug education money. So that doesn't leave a lot of discretionary funding. The police department does not request a general fund budget for the purchase of equipment costing more than $5,000, and we do not receive an annual capital budget allocation. Those two facts are very important because all of those items have to come out of our asset forfeiture money. This same chart that I had up a few minutes ago, now the items in red are items that would have been capital purchases. We would have gone to the capital budget committee and asked for money for had we not had asset forfeiture money. The items in blue are major equipment purchases, equipment that has been very essential to solving crimes. Our forensic equipment, our SWAT equipment, intelligence equipment. If you look at the things that are in red there, the capital items, we have mobile video recorders and cameras and LPRs that have been essential. We have the setup for the Fusion Center, which is the real-time crime center that Captain Bailey, or Chief Bailey, was referring to earlier. Our forensic video analysis system is what allows us to go in and enhance the video that we get from gas stations or small markets or businesses that help us solve these crimes. So all of these important investigation tools have been bought out of asset forfeiture money, not to mention things like the purchase of the Radcliffe building that we paid a lot out of asset forfeiture for. So in just that 5-year period, almost $2.3 million was spent out of asset forfeiture that otherwise would have had to come out of the capital budget. And we had almost $200,000 in equipment that we purchased that would have otherwise had to come from the general fund. The green item that was on that page was grant match money. We have put $150,000 in that 5-year period into matches for grants that allowed us to get over $500,000 in grant funding that has helped to support police overtime and other programs within the department. Both the state and federal law prohibit supplanting, so you can't take money out of the general fund and expect us to replace it with asset forfeiture. That's illegal. But when we do things like the drug testing, where we start paying for it out of asset forfeiture to begin with, we're okay. The other thing we cannot do is budget for funds we haven't received yet. And I mean actually received the funds, not made the seizure. So when I talk about having $210,000 of recurring costs, we're getting ready to budget for fiscal year 15. I have to have at least that much sitting in my fund in order to be able to plan for those expenditures, because I can't anticipate that we're going to bring that in next year. That's not illegal. So that's pretty much our slide presentation. Both the chief and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have for us.
First, thank you very much for your presentation. My question is, if somebody is listening and they would like to apply, contact you, they have some organization that they would like to get funding for that fits within the criteria, where would they call? Who would they contact?
They can contact me. It's Ellie Topham. My number is 352-2987. I'll be happy to give them information, but the information's also on the city's intranet site. If you go to the police department's site on there, the application and everything is right there for them to complete.
And I also see that funding went out. I mean, there are lots of great things on this list, so I'm just identifying one of them, but infant mortality campaign, right? So a lot of people don't know that, you know, our city has experienced, and our county has experienced high infant mortality numbers. Those are babies that are dying before the age of 1, and those numbers are way too high for our county. Our health department, I think, has been doing a great job of trying to bring those numbers down by dispatching nurses and talking to young people who are at risk, who are pregnant. But I didn't know until today that our police department was also in that fight. So it's nice to see that there, and I just want to publicly thank you for that. That's awesome. Vice Chair, any questions? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate the presentation. You know, I like getting the information so that we have some parameters, and we thank you again for your service, Chief. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Please
sir.
continue to send the message to your command staff that we appreciate all of the hard work that they're doing, that this committee supports you. We support our police officers, and let's keep putting pressure on the bad guys. We're not after the good guys. You know, the good guys who are hearing this, you know, we're trying to keep them safe. I'm saying obvious things. The people that have to worry are the bad guys. And what we're trying to do is put a comprehensive plan together. There is no dragnet. We're not out just randomly stopping people. All of that stuff are urban myths. We're targeting people. We know who they are. And I also saw funding going to SERV coordination services, which is also, I mean, I could highlight all of these things, but SERV is an important tool that we're using right now, and it's nice to see that drug asset forfeiture money is going to those initiatives to support SERV. So thank you all so much. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say globally, I mean, we've had a couple presentations from the police department, and I think you said it earlier as well. We just want to thank you for all of your work. And I was a fan from the beginning because you get the importance of focusing on young people. And I want to thank you for, you all did a great presentation about all the work you all are doing with our young people to make sure that they're not victims, to make sure they're not perpetrators of crime. That preventative work is as important or more important than the retroactive work that we do. And so I just want to thank you for getting that. You got that from day one. Our young people are being targeted. They are in trouble. And so I just want to thank you for focusing on that work so that we can make sure we don't have a whole nother generation of individuals who we're hunting down later. And so I just thank you for getting that and for all the wonderful work that your department is doing in that area.
Thank you, Councilwoman Simpson. And it is important to note that I do agree wholeheartedly that we do our best in the preventative end, especially with our city's youth. so that we minimize that number that's going to be involved in that bad guy category that you spoke of, Chairman Smitherman, and we want to reduce those numbers. Certainly, we're going to be tough on those individuals that require that tough. We will. You have my word on that. But on the other side, we have a robust youth platform, youth engagement platform that hopefully will make a difference. I know it did this past Friday. We had over 240 young men and women in 3 of the rec centers with the H3 Sensi program, and it was wonderful. I would encourage you to come out to that and just see how wonderful that program is. It is not a basketball program. It is a character, integrity, and leadership program using basketball as the hook to get them in the door so that we can dribble in their hearts for about 3 hours, and it's been wonderful.
That's awesome. And let me say that, you know, as we move forward, and I hope, I know will happen, won't be hope, it will happen, we'll have our first call-in at some point. And people have to realize that part of the call-in is to, one is obvious, to say, we know who you are. But there's also a part of that which deals with what you just discussed, that we have opportunities and different pathways for you to take. We want you to take this pathway. So it's important. But if you don't take that pathway, then we also have this for you. So part of the call-in process is to share with them that globally, here are your 2 options. We want you to make the right choice. Right?
Absolutely.
But if you make the wrong one, I don't want those young people, and I know this is true, they understand that as you're dribbling into their heart, you're giving them an option. They should understand that. But if they choose not to take that, not to allow the dribbling into their heart, that we have a stick, right?
That's right.
And we're not bashful for using the stick to tell them and make sure that they understand that we're going to hold them accountable. And I've gotten that message very clearly from you, and I'm very supportive of it. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you for allowing us the time to speak.
Absolutely. I just want to give one update before we go. My campaign, and I don't know if Councilmember Simpson was here, I don't think you were at that meeting, I submitted a communication regarding the last election, and that my campaign had filed a complaint with the Ohio Elections Commission on the last election, where this independent body did this huge expenditure with no name, no visibility, who they are. And my campaign followed up after the election and filed a complaint with the Ohio Elections Commission. And we will provide that documentation. I will, as a citizen, as a communication. But here's what happened at the end of the day. The Ohio Elections Commission on Thursday found probable cause. Now, that's serious. And I want the community to know that we're not letting it go. We're going to find out who ran those ads, who handed out that literature, who was involved in that campaign, and who broke the law. And we're going to track them to the ends of the earth. There is no place they will be able to hide. And I want to just be very, very clear. There are lots of laws and things that people get involved in. And they get out in the street, and we point fingers at these young guys out here who are breaking the law. And then we have people engage the political process, and they break the law, right? And they say they're the adults in the room. They're the ones that are supposed to be doing the right thing. They have big degrees, they have JDs, they have MBAs, they have PhDs, but then they put together these initiatives that try to undermine the political process. And I'm going to make sure that I keep this right in the front of the public, and I'm going to make sure that everybody knows the outcome of what occurred. But the Ohio Election Commission on Thursday found probable cause. That's serious. And now what is going to happen is depositions. And we're going to get to the bottom of finding out who was involved. I want to thank my committee members so much for being here for this meeting. I want to thank the fathers that came forth. We thank them for their testimony. We continue to pray, and I think all of our committee members spoke eloquently about that. I want to thank Crime Stoppers for coming, and I want to thank the chief And I want to thank Ms. Ella, make sure I pronounce it right, Topham, for coming and your presentation. We thank all of you. And if there's no other business to come before this committee, we are adjourned.